Hi, welcome back to the A&S Way with me, Sel and Ant. I'm going to keep throwing that in sometimes and other times I won't, just depends on how I feel. This is episode 6 of our life journey. If you haven't already, there's 5 other episodes going way back to when we were tiny
Babies.
children, and how our thoughts had started as younglings, we call it that. And this episode we're going to discuss how we got our first house and really how we transitioned from the apartment, which we got through a shared ownership scheme purely on Anton's salary, to getting our first house together.
Yeah, it was
not easy.
No, definitely not easy, and it was a lot of making the right decisions, even if you didn't know they were the right ones at the time, but always heading towards the same shared goal. So I think we'd both had salary increases because you had left the hospital.
I'd left the NHS, I'd moved to a private company and then moved to another private company, and then I'd left that company for a consulting job, was working as under a limited company, and then went back. So my salary had increased quite significantly in that time, but we were still battling.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to go from, I think at the time, a £200,000 2-bed apartment to, in our area, a £450,000 house. So there were a few things we had to consider. 1, we needed more money. 2, we needed a cash injection. And 3, we probably needed to leave that area because we didn't have the capacity to buy a home in that
there was
area.
a couple of things that affected us at the time. So house prices were increasing, but then there was what we wanted, the wants. So Anton was quite particular about his wants. You wanted a detached house.
I wanted a detached house, wanted a nice garden. I wanted it reasonably big. I wanted a garage so I could store my cars and my car parts, and a bike if I wanted a bike in there again. And those were the fundamentals for me of what I wanted.
And I would point out as well, Ant really struggled in the flat with the space. Really struggled. Like he moaned
daily,
about,
like with everything.
He just couldn't stand it. And I wasn't although I was working from home, I was travelling a lot, so the working from home wasn't really the issue, but you were working out in the space.
Yeah,
you couldn't just buy things and store it. It was tough.
It felt tough for me, so I wasn't particularly happy with that, and I was less concerned about the area at the time, more concerned about the property.
Whereas I cared more about the area. I had my friends and family that I grew up with in that area. I was going to a boot camp in Blackheath, which I loved going to. So for me, location and food. So the closer you are to London, the better food you get. So for me, location was everything.
Which is why they say location, location, location. The problem with that is because you say it 3 times, it costs 3 times the amount. So we had to kind of find a middle ground.
Compromise.
And I began my search, and I knew what I wanted, and we found a place way out in the sticks, and it was an area that was under development, and I'd done some research, and I put in 100 million in over the next 10 years, I think at that time. They had plans for car parks, hotels, cinema, I can't remember what else they had said. All of the stuff that would draw people
no one's
in.
there.
But no one was there at the time. There was a housing estate built about 8 or 10 years prior, and then the new housing estates would be the ones that we were going to buy on. So I had proposed this to Selena as an investment opportunity.
And just so one thing I would point out, throughout all of this, I had made lots of suggestions of other houses that we could have bought closer to where we was, but Ant was not having any of it because they were semi-detached, didn't have the drive, whereas I was far more flexible. I would have compromised on the home to be in a location, whereas Ant was
pretty set on the home type.
So one day he says to me, I found a house, it possibly fits everything that we want, just be open-minded, was what he said.
So we were open-minded, and actually the houses were amazing.
I
still love the design of the house. And it was a long-term thing, so short-term we were going to suffer because we were far from family and friends. We had to change pretty much everything that we did to that area.
Yeah,
you couldn't
it's not
access.
like the gyms that we use in the boot camp I was going to. Just everything, just seeing your friends, which would normally be 10, 15 minutes maximum to see, you're now 30,
But the
40
equivalent
minutes.
house would have been at least 100,000 more in the area that we were in. And not only that, the potential for growth in the home that we were moving to, we chose to move to, was much higher, as has proven, how many years has it been? 6 years later, it's proven that it's probably worth 100,000 more than we paid for it 6 years ago, maybe 85 to 100,000 more. So we'd both had salary increases, yours mostly from moving to a private company, mine because I was already in a, actually, is it a private company? Whatever, and threatened to leave, so they gave me a nice pay rise. And then what happened?
We were saving a lot for the deposit,
Yes.
so we mentioned we didn't get any handouts of cash injections from family to go towards the deposit. So the hardest bit for us was that we just needed enough. The mortgage wasn't the issue. We knew we could afford the mortgage. The issue was getting the deposit and building that, plus all the moving expenses and everything. But the main thing was the deposit. So we looked into the Help to Buy scheme.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that's how we got that first property, which in the UK is a government-backed scheme for where
First time buyers,
Buyers.
where the government will back 20% of the loan. So you get the loan from a normal loan, Halifax, whichever bank, providing they are part of that scheme, and the government essentially guarantee them that. So you don't have to put that 20% down, you put 5% down or more. I think we put slightly more down, and you effectively get one, a much better mortgage because the bank sees it as 25% down, so it decreases your rate, and two, you don't need to pay the interest because it's an interest-free loan for 5 years.
Yeah, that's
On the
really good.
fifth year and beyond, they add, I can't remember,
Like
it's
Bank of
half
England plus,
percent.
it's a
plus
tiny
0.1.
amount.
There's a whole lot of maths in there where this is actually a fantastic scheme because you save double effectively.
And I remember at the time saying to my friends that even if you can afford the house and you don't need the government scheme, it makes sense financially to go for that and then just buy out the remainder after the 5 years or within the 5 years. It's because of that 5 years interest rate and at the reduced rate, it just makes so much sense.
The main concern we had is I think at that point we'd already had aspirations to buy other places to rent out. But on this scheme, you cannot own another property anywhere in the world. At that time we didn't. We sold our flat. We were moving there, so that worked out fine. But we did have plans to do it, so we had to kind of work out at what point we would be able to afford that. It isn't just the case of being able to afford the next place. You then have to buy out that 20% the government has backed in order to make it legal to buy the next home. You can't have to buy home and another property. Even if it's not for rental, even if it's just a second home, you can't have that.
Yeah, and we knew that was something within the first year or so. We knew we were looking at buying other places to rent. And at that time I'd switched into more of a sales role, so I started getting bonuses as well. So we started discussing how to invest. And we're not really going to go into this video, but the initial kind of thinking was use that money, the bonus money, to go into property that we would rent out. But then because of that, we knew we had to come out of the scheme. So then there was lots of things going on, and well, actually another thing with other houses as well. But this is all about planning, because we'd discussed maximising on the 5 years interest free, but then we'd also discussed that what we didn't want to do is get to the point where we could financially afford to buy another house, but then have to then sort out this government scheme. So we made a decision, I think when we knew it was very, very likely
that we would remortgage. And now we didn't put the money in because we bought that house so cheaply. We could remortgage the house. I think it was 2.5 years later, wasn't it? We remortgaged the home, which no cash out of our pocket, and paid off that 20, well, not paid off, but mortgaged it in to that because the home price had increased significantly within that 2.5 years. Now, some of it is luck, but in this case I don't think it was, because we did enough research that the area was always going to have money pumped into it. So the prices were not going to go down but for a financial crash.
The other thing that we did this with the apartment, and I think we did it with the house as well, we would overpay our mortgage. And
Oh yeah,
it's
we've not mentioned
really
that.
good
Yeah.
trick.
If you
It
don't
really makes sense,
have
yeah.
other solid investments available to you, or it's not going to make a massive difference, overpaying your mortgage can be a really, really good option. Now, at that time, I'm still not super financially savvy, but I was just trying to do my best. I didn't know really about what are the best investments. What I did know was, if I pay more of my, if we can afford to just put money into the mortgage, that means less at the end. That's all I thought. So we both did. We ended up paying, I think, the flat, we were paying double the mortgage.
A lot, yeah.
And that was back when mortgage rates were 6.5%, which is unknown to people in this. So we were paying, when we originally got the flat, it was 6.5%, and then it went down, I think, once the financial crash happened to, I don't know, 1.5 or 2.5, whatever it happened to be. So we'd actually built up a little bit in there, and then we did exactly the same with the house, which freed up some cash when we came to remortgage.
Yeah, and if you're curious, if you're a homeowner, there's so many calculators online where you can go in, put your mortgage, how much you're paying, and then just put
Money
in
saving
expert is good for that.
Yeah.
Even anything from £50, whatever you can afford, 50, 100 to maybe 1,000, and it really shows you how much that significantly reduces your mortgage now.
Yeah, so at this point, there's additional property stories coming up in a later video, but what have we done? We've gone from our young life into our school life, into our post-school life, our first apartment, and hopefully you're paying attention to the stories. You'll see that we haven't really had money up until that point. So there's this rapid departure from being poor at the age of 21-ish to actually earning a reasonable amount of money, and actually then building up.
And not a modest income, as he pointed out in my other video.
In the video prior to this, but building up cash without actually having the cash. So we didn't have £30,000. We made £30,000 in property. So we had now a positive net value between us without actually putting that cash in. So hopefully it gives some idea of how you can make money without actually having the cold hard cash. And definitely what you should be picking up is, you don't want to really work that hard for it. If you're out at work and just saying, oh, I've made an extra £200 this week, and then you go and spend it, whereas me, I would be working less, thinking more, and probably making £400 that week just by the growth in the property.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, when I was in the NHS, I would take extra shifts, I would work the weekends, I would do the, I can't remember what you call it now, but basically be available at the weekends on call, and to earn that extra money, but I wouldn't spend it. And the one thing throughout all those years that I maintained, whether I was in the NHS or working in the private companies where I was earning more, I saved so much. I would maximise. So to this day, I still have a spreadsheet. I have not let go of my spreadsheet, and anything in excess, and I live by that. I'm very rigid. I'm far more relaxed now here, actually, in Vegas, completely far more relaxed, but I've always just had my set amount of money that I know that I'll spend on a car, on activities, on things. I would even say that I'm allowed to spend £100, as an example, on shopping for myself. That's it, maximum.
Yeah, and we did budget for holidays. So if we were saving up,
holidays.
it was 2,000 holiday, we've just saved that throughout the year. It is a good point. I think that is probably the fundamental, is budget and plan. Have some form of tracker is the best baseline to do this. The property stuff is maybe a couple of levels up, but know what you earn, know what you spend. That is the absolute key. I've got friends, I don't know whether they're like this now, that would never check their bank account because they were too scared, which meant they knew they were spending more than they earned, which always made no sense to me. So I would say, if you're going to take anything away, just budget and plan.
So that's our journey to our first house. We thought we would just give you some understanding of what it took for us going from the apartment, making it clear we didn't have this cash injection. I was certainly very militant with myself on social activities. I didn't have a social life for a number of years. Not any of these lavish meals, going out with friends, any of that. I was very strict. I made sure to save so that we could get that deposit. to the point, and we compromised. We were not in a position to pick a house where we wanted, so we compromised on the house, the location. And actually, in a later video, we'll explain what that compromise taught Anne separately about location. That spurred the whole thing of definitely needing to get out of the UK at that point. But it was a great investment for us. Well, that's it then. If you haven't already, you know what to do. If you've been watching this series, you should know what to do right now. Subscribe. And if for those of you, why aren't you subscribing if you're watching?
Still 60% of people are not subscribed. So even if you're never going to watch another video, just subscribe for us.
Yeah. Please do subscribe, hit the like button, tell us what you think about this series of videos about us sharing our life journey, especially if it resonates, or maybe if it doesn't, like things that are different, or that you challenge us a bit maybe on some of our ideologies. That would be really interesting to hear. So subscribe, like and comment below.
Thanks for watching.